We have a lot of news to cover in today's video, including the latest trade talk on teams like the Oilers, the Islanders, the Devils, the Washington Capitals, the Chicago Blackhawks, and Marc-Andre Fleury. Could Claude Giroux end up in Calgary? We have news out of Vancouver and a new assistant general manager. We have news from the waiver wire, and Martin St. Louis, the new Habs coach, was introduced to the media today, and we learned a fair bit about what he might be attempting to do in the direction of the team. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about. We really have a lot to cover here today. Let's start with some news out of Vancouver. First up, we found out that they've hired Cammi Granato to be an assistant general manager. So that's obviously another prominent female getting involved in NHL circles here. Of course, she was already previously working for the Seattle Kraken as a scout. So she obviously was, continuing to be a bit of a trailblazer in that sense, getting on with the Kraken and now getting an opportunity at a fairly substantial promotion to assistant GM with the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, a long-time great hockey player from the U.S. Her, along with husband Ray Ferraro, have lived in Vancouver for some time. So certainly that's an easy transition from that sense, from family purposes as well. So obviously I think this is a great addition. We've seen Jim Rutherford continue to round out his staff. He also has Emily Castonguay. So a couple of prominent females involved in the Canucks organization. So it's really great to see some good diversity and more females getting opportunities that are certainly well qualified and well deserving. More news out of Vancouver today. The Canucks have placed Justin Dowling on waivers, so we will find out at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow if he's still a member of the Canucks or if he will end up clearing and can be reassigned. Now, the Edmonton Oilers also have a player on waivers today, and that's Brad Malone. Now, he's on waivers because he was already playing with them in the American Hockey League, but he was on an AHL-only deal. He's getting signed to a two-way deal, but he'll need waivers to be able to get brought up to the NHL level. So Malone will likely only get signed. I'm not sure the exact terms of the contract. We'll probably find that out tomorrow, but it's likely for the rest of the season on probably a league minimum two-way contract for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, we also have another suspension we talked a bit about yesterday. We knew it was coming because there was a hearing, but Marcus Foligno has been suspended for 2 games. Of course, the Jets and Wild game the other night got rather out of hand, lots of fights, certainly a very physical game, and we saw Marcus Foligno in a scrap with Adam Lowry. After they went down to the ice, he was kneeing Lowry in the head. So certainly we knew a suspension was coming. We knew that that hearing was happening today. So really no big surprise. Foligno doesn't have I'm not sure much or any history really. He's always been a player who's been very physical, not afraid to fight and be involved, but never really crosses the line. And this is unusual for him. It's out of character, so I didn't expect much. I said 1 or 2 games is likely what was going to end up coming down. Now, news out of Montreal today. We had the introduction of new head coach Martin St. Louis to the Montreal media, of course, accompanied by general manager Kent Hughes and the VP of Hockey Operations and Executive Vice President Jeff Gorton. So certainly had a lot of interesting things to say. Of course, we know Marty St. Louis, a player that was come out of U.S. college hockey, of course, a Quebec native, but always very small, 5'9", always been a player that in his younger years especially was doubted to make it to the NHL, had to work extra hard, a player who was undrafted, always defying the odds. It looks like he's going to continue to try to do that as somebody who comes in as a head coach for the Montreal Canadiens with really no coaching experience. I mean, he's coached minor hockey. The last team he was helping coach with was U13 Pee Wee team. One of the comments he made, which was certainly a joke, but I thought it was appropriate in a sense, was that he said that the one thing the Habs need to start doing is learning to have fun again. The season's pretty much lost, and they need to make the best of it here and have some fun. And obviously, he said his Pee Wee team liked to have fun, and obviously maybe he's the most qualified based on his recent experience with them. It certainly, it wasn't serious. He was fun, trying to be funny there, but it's like I said, it just kind of almost seems appropriate. But a couple of things he said was very interesting. One, he said he's not a fan of systems. He finds a lot of top-end skilled players kind of get boxed in by a lot of systems, and he was never a fan of them himself as a player. Found it frustrating. He said he certainly likes more of a concepts coach, and within concepts you can have a lot of structure, which is fine. But he said that certainly within systems, players get limited on what they can do. There's not a lot of read and reacting. And he said the high-end elite players have the high-end ability to make those reads and reactions, and they need to be able to do that to make the right decisions, to be able to play and give them a little bit of freedom on the ice. So it certainly seems like he'll be letting some of the top players, especially his top offensive players, have a little bit more wiggle room and freedom as to how they play, which will certainly be very beneficial. I would think a player like Cole Caulfield will benefit greatly from him. He also said he didn't really care too much about the terms of the contract because he wanted to make sure that it was the right fit for him as well. We heard comments from Elliotte Friedman on the hiring today, indicating that now that St. Louis has been hired and we've had a chance to find out a little bit more, that it sounds like part of his role is to really help them analyze this roster and determine who is part of the solution moving forward and who are the problematic players that should be moved on. That's essentially a big part of what he's going to do, but where it's only for the rest of the year on an interim basis, I have no doubt based on what we heard that he likely is their long-term guy. But obviously, they're paying a lot of people right now to not work for them. They might want to just get through the rest of this year to make sure that it's going to work out and that he wants to stay on as well. Obviously, he went on to say his father was a long-time Habs fan, so it was quite a surreal thing for him. So that's quite something. We know that these guys are connected. A couple of things you may not know. Obviously, Kent Hughes and Marty St. Louis have known each other for an extended period of time. And not only do they know each other from past circles, but they also, both of their sons play for Northeastern University. So, of course, Kent Hughes, as I mentioned before, his son, he has two boys actually at Northeastern, but Jack, there's going to be another Jack Hughes, is expected to be a first-round pick in this year's draft. And, of course, Marty St. Louis' son, Ryan, also on the same roster. So they were actually spotted watching in Northeastern. I don't know if it's a practice or a game just in the last couple of days here. So certainly well known to each other from past and present. And Jeff Gorton, of course, knows him from his time when he was with the New York Rangers organization as well. So certainly Marty St. Louis is somebody who is very familiar with both these guys, and they have a lot of confidence in them. Apparently, Gorton tried to hire St. Louis to coach the Rangers AHL team a number of years ago. I believe it was back in 2017. But at that point, he wasn't really ready to jump into a full-time coaching role, wanted more time with family, so he didn't take him up on the offer. But clearly, Jeff Gorton has seen Marty St. Louis as somebody who's likely going to get into coaching and thought he'd make a good coach for some time. So, obviously this is not really a big shocker. I know a lot of people said, oh, they're all hiring their friends, but you know what? The connections do make a difference in the corporate world. This is no different. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of Habs fans feel a lot better about this hiring after hearing him speak and think about what he's likely going to bring to the table. And he will be making his coaching debut for the Montreal Canadiens tonight. So we'll see how everything goes, and we certainly wish him the best. As I said in the video when announcing the hiring yesterday, it was a little surprising in the sense that they now have a GM and a coach, both with no prior experience in those roles. But knowing that Marty St. Louis is such a hard worker, such a determined guy, had to almost overcome the odds his entire life, as a hockey Hall of Famer, over 1,000 points as a player, over 1,000 games played. One of those real solid guys who just did everything right and worked so hard to get where he's at. I have no doubt that he will probably work out fine and make a great coach. We just don't know. That's the only thing that I said, was he doesn't really have anything that we can kind of look at from his past to kind of get an idea what kind of coach he'll be, if he'll be a good fit. But we just know what he was as a player, and we'll see. But based on the interview today, I have to say, I think that things sound promising in Montreal, that they have a good crew of management and coaches in place now to take this team down the right direction. Now, of course, we learned some more about the Edmonton Oilers today after they fired head coach Dave Tippett. Heard some more comments from Elliotte Friedman saying that Ken Holland reportedly was trying to get a goaltender. That's not something that obviously has happened, but he had been trying. Apparently, they had made inquiries on Martin Jones and Jonas Korpisalo, and the reason that neither deal ever came to be was that they felt the asking price was too high. It was believed they offered something around like a 5th round pick for Jones, It's believed that the Korpisalo situation in Columbus, that they weren't looking for a first-round pick, but it sounds like they were looking for multiple, maybe mid-round, like second, third rounders. And I think that they felt that was too much as well. So obviously Ken Holland has not pulled the trigger on anything besides signing Evander Kane recently. Now Tippett pays the price. Like I said, I think that there's some things he could have done differently as a head coach. But for the most part, I think Ken Holland deserves a lot of the blame because of the roster construction. And, it's unfortunate that Tippett never really had solid goaltending to work with. But keep in mind that Mike Smith is Dave Tippett's guy. And I have no doubt that Tippett played a big role in him continuing to come back to the Oilers as well. Tippett's worked with Mike Smith as his goalie at his time in Arizona with the Coyotes as well as the Stars. They've had a long history together, so I don't think Ken Holland's entirely to blame here, like I said, but he's a big part of it for sure. This year, though, the fact that he wasn't able to go out and get goaltending help kind of, sealed his fate. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. I do think Tippett's a good coach, but things were getting out of control, and they needed to do something, and they better hope that they get like a bounce back effect, which you often see from a new coach coming in. Doesn't always work, but quite often it does. And I would suggest Ken Holland continue to look for that goaltending help and maybe take a page out of some other organizations and franchises around the NHL that have a lot of star power, like the Penguins or the Lightning. Like these guys that have been very successful winning Stanley Cups because they have multiple high-end players. The Oilers got McDavid, Draisaitl. Pittsburgh's got Crosby and Malkin. What do they always do? They don't worry about the future. They worry about today. And I understand Ken Holland's quite often said that he's going to protect the assets for the future and can't overpay. I get all that. But really, you've got McDavid and Draisaitl in their prime right now. If you worry too much about the future, today is never going to happen. You're going to have frustrated guys, and it's never going to work out. So to me, you need to kind of put what you got on the table and get the job done now while you have them in your prime and before it gets bad to the point that they don't want to be there anymore. If I'm Ken Holland, that's what I'm going to do. Look at the model for the Penguins was there as long as they had Crosby and Malkin, Letang playing at a high level, they're going to continuously go for it. They've traded numerous prospects and first-rounders, etc. Look at other teams have done the same thing and quite often been successful. But the Penguins, to me, is one of the templates you could look at. The Lightning, on the other hand, to a degree have done sort of the same thing. So, we'll see what happens. But Ken Holland's got a lot of blame on his hands. And if this coaching change does not work out, well, he's next. So that's just as simple as that. Now, when it comes to the Islanders, who I want to look at, there's multiple players that the Islanders could be looking to move here. And, of course, I don't expect Lou to do anything anytime soon. I think he'll take his time to see where his team is at closer to the deadline. But there's certainly a few players that could become trade bait. One being Cal Clutterbuck, which has been mentioned here by a few NHL insiders, that he's a pending UFA. If the Islanders are not heading for the playoffs, and that's certainly odds are greatly against them, I would suspect that there's a good chance he could be moved. A couple other guys to look at, too, would be Varlamov and Scott Mayfield. Now, no guarantees either of those guys get traded. They don't have to do that. But there's certainly a couple of players I think would certainly generate some interest for sure and could generate some cap space flexibility that the Islanders need to address a few things in the offseason. They still need another defenseman who can move the puck, ideally, but Noah Dobson's emerged enough to the point that that's not quite as pressing as it was before, but certainly need to round out the decor a little bit better, and at the same time, they need some scoring. But really, the scoring forward has almost become more of a bigger deal right now because of Dobson emerging and really kind of taking some big steps forward there. But, they need to find some ways to do it. Now, of course, Varlamov's making a decent amount of money. They have Sorokin, who can certainly carry the workload. Makes sense that he could be available. Maybe he'd be a guy the Oilers would be interested in, but if they don't want to pay the prices that they're looking for Jones and Korpisalo, I can't see them wanting to pay for Varlamov, but you know what? They need to do something because they need a goaltender there and they need one pronto, but we'll see what happens there. But Mayfield could be a target for the Maple Leafs. We talked a lot about having a right shot defenseman to solidify that second pair with Jake Muzzin. At the same time, going to give him some Jake Muzzin insurance, a guy who can play the same style of game. Mayfield checks all those boxes. He comes with a little bit of term as well, and not a very expensive contract. He's got size, got decent speed, can move the puck. We've seen what he did in the playoffs and last couple of years with the Islanders on their longer runs. He was a pretty decent piece to that. And, it doesn't mean that they have to move him. They may not. But for the right price, I think that's something that Lou would certainly consider doing. And, he would check all those boxes for the Leafs. We've heard Dubas say that ideally they want a right-shot defenseman. They want somebody with term. They want, obviously, have to watch their cap situation closely. That would be easier to do. Maybe they send the Islanders a prospect, or maybe they send Travis Dermott or something to that effect. That might just work out. So we'll see where that goes, but we might see the old, rivalry here, and I guess the old mentor, so to speak, of Lou and Dubas maybe hook up on a deal. We'll see where that goes. When it comes to Claude Giroux, his name has been brought up by Pierre LeBrun today as being a target of the Calgary Flames, which is not the first time we've heard this, but it certainly sounds like the way LeBrun was talking, that the Flames certainly have more than a little bit of casual interest here. It sounds like they have a lot of interest. Now, I think the Flames are also looking at other options. I think it's quite possible, as I talked about yesterday, that we'll see a trade with the Habs. Tyler Toffoli is a big target of theirs, and to me, I think that's more likely. I'm not so sure that I see Giroux going to the Flames, but it is, it does make sense that there would be interest for sure. Calgary was reportedly having interest in a few players. He also mentions Tomas Hertl from San Jose being a potential target, but at this point, it sounds like Hertl has a better chance of staying in San Jose. We know at the beginning of the year, it sounded like he was going to get traded, but now that Evander Kane's gone from San Jose and all those distractions, things are different with that locker room. The team seems to be a lot happier. The players seem happier, and it sounds like Hertl's a lot more open to staying, and it sounds like from what we've heard as well is that they have had some dialogue on an extension. It's not done. It doesn't sound like it's real close right now, but it sounds like at least it's promising enough that there's a good chance he will stay. So we may not see him move after all. And when it comes to Giroux, of course, he's got full control. We know that the Flyers at this point likely won't trade him right up until the deadline. He will likely end up playing in his game number 1,000 shortly before the deadline, and I'm sure that the team and the player would rather see him do that in a Flyers uniform. So I would suspect he won't get moved early. I think he'll likely won't get moved until the deadline itself and until he's had a chance to complete that milestone game with them. Whether it's Calgary or somewhere else, we don't know. But according to LeBrun, the Flames have heavy interest in Claude Giroux. Now, another name that you might see on the move as well is Devils defenseman Damon Severson, somebody who is, to my opinion, not reliable defensively, but again, somebody who can help you on the power play, decent offensively, good passer, but we've seen a couple of real atrocious defensive plays from him here recently. I think we're going to see general manager Tom Fitzgerald of the Devils maybe make a few moves to kind of reshape this team a little bit, and Severson could be an odd man out, especially with Dougie Hamilton being there in that big contract. They may not want their other right shot D making quite so much money. You have to wonder about PK Subban as well. No really guarantees what happens to him. He's making $9 million, so even if they retain half for the rest of the season, that's still a cap hit of $4.5 million, which is tricky. So I'm not sure what his future holds. I think there's a possibility he gets dealt, but I would say it's probably a lot lower than many of the other players that we've discussed here. Now, when it comes to Marc-Andre Fleury, apparently the Washington Capitals have tried and pushed really hard to convince the netminder to come to Washington via trade from Chicago. Chicago and the Caps have engaged in the dialogue around that possibility, and it sounds like Fleury is not having any of it, and he's not accepting that deal, which is why it has not come to be. We believe that the Capitals are willing to offer up Vitek Vanacek as a goalie going out in a trade for a goaltender upgrade. They're willing to move possibly the first round pick, and maybe even a player like Michael Kempny could be available as well. But a couple of interesting assets, so like their first rounder and Vanacek, I would think they'll find something that'll work out. But they were really hoping to get Fleury, but as we talked about before, even though he's been removed from the team for a long time, he's a long-time Penguin, big rival in Washington. I just don't think he could bring himself to competing against his old friends and joining his former rival there with the Capitals organization, but it is expected he will end up somewheres, but he does have a lot of control, and it's difficult to say exactly where that will be at this point in time. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.